Ask you in relation to your Treasury corporate plan, which was released fairly soon. It's quite a thin, glossy document. Issues like housing affordability, especially for young Australians. More broadly, income inequality. ACOS recently put out some fairly shocking statistics about entrenched poverty in this country, and of course climate change. I didn't rate a mention in that corporate plan at all. Do you not take those issues seriously in terms of your planning and your strategic advice to the government?
No, of course we do. The corporate plan, we can't cover everything. The corporate plan was meant
but they're pretty important things to cover.
They're very, absolutely. And through our heads of Treasury meeting, we have been working on housing affordability now for 1.5 years. We have a report that will be going to the next heads of Treasury meeting. It was a major item in the discussions we had in Darwin recently, which I chaired. Climate change is a very important issue, clearly, but the corporate plan was meant to provide a crisp and precise rubric for what Treasury is about. And Treasury is about increasing the living standards and the sustainable growth prospects for those living standards for all Australians. And when you...
Well, I
By the way, I apologise for being glossy. I did everything under my control to not make it glossy.
In terms of that, I accept that's your broad mandate. You talked about the invisible hand a bit earlier, and to some people in this country, they feel the invisible hand's taking away from them. It's not necessarily giving to them. I mean, I understand how Adam Smith's kind of quote fits into the context of that. But can I just ask you, just in relation to housing affordability, so that report you say is going to the Treasury Committee?
We've got a KIFA meeting of the state treasurers and territory treasuries in early November. We had a heads of Treasury meeting in Darwin recently. We have, not regular, but we'll have a hook-up again rather than bringing everybody to Canberra. And we have a report in that that's being chaired, if I remember, by Victoria on housing affordability. I think housing affordability is a massive issue. The charities I'm involved in are very much, both here in the United Kingdom, that is the item which is foremost. So I'm very much involved myself. It worries me. I think I said in my first appearance in front of the estimates, I said it was a very real worry, and I'm not just talking for young people entering the housing market who are professionals. I'm talking particularly about the lower income people, and it's an area which I do worry about, and it's also, but it's bound up with a welter of other issues, and they all seem to me to be coming back to questions which are related to microeconomic reform, issues of land supply, issues of regulations, issues of building costs, and also infrastructure. It's no good building you come down the Hume Highway and you see these wonderful housing developments that have grown out of nowhere, and I understand the infrastructure has put in, but it's a package, and that's been a focus of the discussions at KIFA and also at COAID.
Have you managed to upgrade your advice for the price of smashed avocados in this country? Do you agree with Bernard Salt that young Australians are spending too much money, or the millennials are spending too much money on $22 smashed avocados at cafes rather than saving to invest in a house?
I understand the issue. I prefer people to start talking about the exorbitant cost of coffee in Melbourne. It's got to be the highest in the world.
So, the Grattan Institute have recently said that 25 to 34-year-olds have gone backwards over the last decade in terms of housing affordability issue. They found that the average 55 to 64-year-old household was $173,000 richer in real terms than was a household of that age 10 years ago. Yet 25 to 35-year-olds have actually had less wealth than people of the same age 10 years before. Even though they save more than did people of that age in the past, is the government, what else are you doing to tackle this kind of intergenerational equity?
Well, it's a huge issue, but here I go.
Good.
I mean, a big factor is the wealth is in houses, and this is the circle that we've got. High house prices, high wealth, people feel far more comfortable about taking more debt. And I don't know about the proceeding. John Daly's a good bloke, but intuitively it doesn't seem wrong, but I'm not going to put my flag to the precise numbers.
But as a general principle...
No, it's a worry. I mean, the bank of mum and dad, and, you know, as an old person, I talk with people my age, and the bank of mum and dad is becoming more and more prevalent. And it has impacts on superannuation, where superannuation is going to. It has impacts on why people are saving in their older years to fund their children's housing needs, and not just purchase, but often rents. And it's a concern, but this is an issue that is prevalent around the world. So I was in London recently, and you're at the pub, and the issue's the same. How much you've got to give the kids to get them a start. Now, London is worse than that. You've got no hope. And I had a son who was over there as a primary school teacher. There's no way he could have been a primary school teacher in London unless someone was picking up the tab for his rent. And that's happening more and more.
You did acknowledge earlier that you weren't as concerned about household debt because the majority of that debt happened to be under higher income Australians. I mean, you did say, I'd have to go back.
No, I didn't say I wasn't concerned about it. I noted.
But
I noted that a lot of it has tended to be, particularly the people, it just makes sense, who are taking out the bigger mortgages tend to have bigger incomes.
But in terms of higher income Australians...
Sorry, you've had 20 minutes. There are other senators that are waiting. Have you got many more questions?
Yeah, just a couple more questions on this line of questioning. If you could come back to me. So Sydney house prices, median house prices have risen 35% to about $880,000. You have talked about over the Sydney market before. So that the 20% deposit required then is about $170,000. And first homeowners in New South Wales have fallen from $6,000 per month to just about $1,300. I mean, the numbers are pretty stark, and you acknowledge this issue as you just have. What exactly are our Treasury recommending government do about this?
Look, we can recommend. We try to recommend things that are sensible but also doable. And the most important thing coming out of the studies we've got at the housing sector is supply issues. It's a supply issue predominantly. Land release. And as I said earlier, it's not just land release, it's the ability to provide infrastructure, sewerage, roads, transport, the whole thing. And I think there have been some welcome developments in New South Wales in particular. Premier Baird announced, I think earlier this year, a number of releases to the northwest of Sydney. I understand the Victorians are doing similar things in other states. I think the only thing that we can do short term that's sensible is in terms of the supply side, facilitating land release, helping with building regulations, getting a proper balance, and of course the productivity in the building sector.
And your view is still, I know you were very careful about what you said last time I asked you this question, as I'd expect you would be, but your view is that still that incentives such as a negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions shouldn't be, aren't the key issue.
Well, it's a huge, my views on those things go well beyond just housing in particular itself, but look, housing's attractive. I think most of us, blessed with good parents, the first thing you were told to do when you got anything was to buy a house. It was and is the best advice you can get.
But you've acknowledged there's a whole generation that's been locked out of the housing market, more or less, and probably will be unless we can tackle.
Sorry, the younger generation.
Yeah, younger generation.
Yeah, well, that's what I've said.
That's right.
I'm not welcoming that. I'm saying that's how it's been, and it's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate, and I've got children myself, and it's as I said. I haven't found many people who are not saying we've got to help the kids.
Last question on this issue.
One more question.
Last question on this issue then. Have you also looked at providing advice to the government around changes to taxation of land, like land taxation? ACT's been through a recent...
The heads of Treasury meeting have been working on this issue ever since I've came back last year.
Yep.
We've looked at it. It's been an interesting and useful discussion with the states, as of course the land tax is in the province of the states and the territories.
Correct. And ACT's obviously had an interesting
I
experiment.
mean, first
with this.
principles, you look very seriously at changes to land tax. There have been changes, of course. Victoria and New South Wales, and I think, but I'm not sure, Queensland have made some changes on land tax, but that's been more in the context of foreign purchases of properties. No, it's an area for further consideration, and but it's being done mainly in with the states and the territories. It's their baby.